What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the ACC college football betting preview. I'm Stucky, and joining me, as always, it's Colin Wilson, as we are back for our sixth installment of our 11-part conference betting preview series. I think it's like our seventh, if you include free Degen and Juice Day. Some of you will remember that short-lived podcast that Colin and I did with a funny song. But excited to talk some ACC today. Colin, what's going on, brother?
Oh, both you and I are back from our West Coast swing, our little vacation time we like to get before we come in and just commit ourselves to 5 months of everyday work. I think you were chasing Buffalo. I think we'll save that for the Pac-12 preview. I was out golfing in Oregon, drove by Autzen, flew out of Eugene. So I guess we'll save all that for our Pac-12 preview. But it's good to be home, wrapped up for media days, and start breaking this down on Power 5 level.
Yeah, look, already rusty. I got a light blinking. I got to change. You've already got a little rust showing. But yeah, I just got back from Yellowstone, Grand Teton in Vegas. There was unfortunately, there was a grizzly bear attacked and killed a woman that was jogging on a trail right behind where I was staying, like right there, 3 days after I left. I think it was only like the 8th or 9th grizzly bear death attacks in the history of the Yellowstone Park, which was pretty wild. So unfortunate situation there, but I fortunately did not run into any grizzlies. Got back from Vegas and finished up some ACC work today. Just to give you guys a heads up on what to expect from the podcast, we have our Sun Belt betting preview, which will release tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the day this drops. And then we will have our Pac-12 betting preview and next week, and so on and so on. So we're just going to have nonstop college football betting content from now until Notre Dame and Navy kick off the season. It'll be here before we know it. So let's dive right in to the ACC. It's good to be back, Colin. And let's break this up. Well, we're recording the ACC. Our second one that you and I are going to record is the Pac-12. And those two conferences are very similar in the fact that no more divisions. So it really changes how you look at the schedules, futures, and who's going to make it to the conference championship game. I love it. I love the change. I think it's great for the conference. I wish the Big Ten would follow suit. But I think it's a good thing for the ACC. So let's start at the top with Clemson and Florida State. Clemson, the favorite. We're going to go based off of current odds at BetMGM, but make sure you obviously always shop around for the best number. But any number that I personally reference right now will be the odds on BetMGM as of right now. Clemson is favored to win the ACC at plus 140. Florida State not far behind at plus 170. Clemson win total over 10 plus 100. Florida State over 9.5 minus 145. The thing to note is that Clemson will host Florida State, which gives them on paper a theoretical edge. I don't know, but the look ahead line was what? Clemson minus 3, maybe?
Yep,
I think I saw Clemson minus 3. And which is really the difference here. I personally have Florida State power rated ahead of Clemson. I believe you do as well. Clemson's won 7 ACC titles in the past 8 years. They've also owned Florida State, but this is a different Florida State team. We saw that last year. Mike Norvell has completely turned this program around. Not only are they super experienced, led by quarterback Jordan Travis, I thought they also did a tremendous job in the portal addressing some of their needs. So, I mean, look, they returned 11 all-ACC players, and plus they added 11 transfers. I think a good chunk of them could really fit in well. The offensive line now is not a glaring weakness, could be a strength. And I think that's really what separates these two teams, is that the transfer portal, which Clemson just ignores. Look, they're going to be super talented. Their defense has a ton of talent. A lot of it's going to come down to Clay Klubnik. And we know about the great hire on paper of Garrett Riley. That offense needed it. So schematic, that's a good thing that Dabo did, right? Let's keep everything here in-house. This is how we do it. think he realized, look, we need to shake things up from a scheme perspective on offense. So these are the two teams at the top. What do you see here? Any value on their win totals, futures at the top, or are they priced right? And you would agree, you have Florida State. You do have Florida State power rated ahead of Clemson, correct?
Yeah, I do. But and I think the line out there right now is Clemson -2.5 in the game of the year. But you're squatting them home field advantage there with that number. And you're right. Clemson 101st in the portal rankings this year. I believe Florida State finished 4th. Clemson's still resting on the fact that they can recruit at a top 5 level for a number of years in a row. And it's good that Dabo at least recognizes that Brandon Streeter was absolutely not worth his weight in anything when it came to calling plays. So they went out and immediately got Garrett Riley. And if you're unfamiliar with the hire, let's just say when you get a TCU squad to go to the national title game and they scored as many points as they did, I mean, as much as I love TCU on defense, but Garrett Riley had such a big influence on what they were doing on offense that it's an instant upgrade here for Clemson. They're going to see a lot of 10 and 11, some air raid concepts, inside zone. And, TCU was top 5 of the nation in pass explosives. Are we going to see that out of Cade Klubnik? I know from an investment standpoint, I'm out there buying Cade Klubnik Bowman Chrome cards just in case he does hit it big. But I think the other side of this is Wes Goodwin on defense. He wasn't, he replaced Brent Venables, and he's kept up the defensive part on the Clemson side. Last year, they ran 29% blitz, which was about average, 55% success rate at creating pressure. So Clemson is one of the best in the nation to do that. They were 6th in defensive havoc, and I don't expect anything different this year. I think to play the futures on these guys, because I do love Florida State, I power rate them higher. Like I said, 4th in the portal. They have a lot of similarities here to LSU. And I think that played out on the field last year with the kick hitting the crossbar. That's the difference between those two teams. I think it's the same difference in week 1 when LSU and Florida State play each other again. They have to improve on finishing drives. They were 91st in defensive finishing drives. Defensive coordinator Adam Fuller has got to get it together when teams get into scoring position, because if Garrett Riley brings the kind of offense we know in the red zone situation, and Florida State continues to have problems when teams are trying to score, that's going to be the difference in these two teams. Now, as far as actionable items, I don't have anything stuck. I project Florida State at 10.2 wins. Can't really act on the 10.5. As far as Clemson goes, they're do we expect, I'll ask you, I'll toss it back to you. I don't expect anybody else, because of the new format, no more coastal, no more trying to figure out that stupid division. These are the two teams that should be in the championship game, no matter who loses in the regular season. So my question is do you try to take one to make the college football playoff and then play against that when they play against each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm neutral on both as far as compared to my projection. So I have no play on either win total. I would lean, like if I had to play it, I do show a small amount of edge on Florida State to win the conference, and mainly just because I have them, let's see, a field goal better than Clemson. So I'm right around a coin flip with that game at Clemson. Now they're underdogs to LSU in the opener. What is that line still? 2? They're catching 2.5, I believe, Florida State. Let me double check that line, because if you, I mean, LSU right now, -2.5. Against Florida State in the opener. So you're looking at, they're going to be 2.5 point dogs against LSU, 2.5 point dogs at, presumably against Clemson. That could change. That's a look headline. I mean, you look at who else they could lose to, at Florida, the finale, that game could be tricky, but they should win that. That Pitt is probably their trickiest game after those last two. Pitt, it's going to be cold. It'll be, their second straight road game before Miami. We know Pitt historically under Narduzzi is going to lose a game they shouldn't and win a game that they should. So maybe, so Florida State could lose to LSU, Clemson, and then Pitt. I could see that's pretty much it. The rest of the schedule is very manageable, but I don't show enough value in the win total. If you really like Florida State and then, they lose to LSU, you would probably bet them against LSU, bet them against Clemson. I'm going to wait to bet them against Clemson in that game. There's no reason or not enough value in the ACC championship futures to tie up my money. But if you're looking for a team in the next tier, because I mean, Florida State, I really like everything that Florida State is doing. I do think that there's a lot of hype now. It's like, right, it's one of these teams that's coming into the season that hasn't been at the top, that has a ton of hype. We've seen these teams consistently not live up to expectations. How do they deal with this hype? And then how does Clemson deal with a new offensive scheme? That remains to be seen. If you're looking for a team that could potentially sneak up and get because look, if you're removing Clemson and Florida State from the equation, because without divisions, that's the most likely matchup. But if you're looking for a team in the futures market where all you need is pretty much then to just get to the ACC championship, let's look at the second tier. We have Duke at 30-1. It's look, a lot of hype for Duke. I love what Mike Elko does. I love Kevin Johns, their OC. They have one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. But this is a team that screams regression, right? Like, schedule gets much tougher. They benefited from a ton of turnover luck. The talent is not quite there. The only case I could make for Duke, and we'll go down the line here, is that Clemson has a new scheme, right? Breaking in a new offensive scheme. They play Duke in the opener. Duke has taken money. I think that line is down to, that game's on the Monday night of it. That line's down to like 11 or 12. So if you're going to get, if we like the hire of Garrett Riley, but there's going to be a significant change schematically on this offense. Duke, really experienced team, super experienced. If Duke can pick off Clemson and pull off that upset in week one, you could find a 40, 50-1. If you're a really big believer in Duke, that would be their path, right? You upset Clemson, have the tiebreaker over Clemson. You lose to Florida State as they would. Clemson drops another one. You're in pretty good. You're in a pretty good spot with a huge number. But I do think that there's some regression coming for Duke. What are your thoughts on the Blue Devils this year with Riley Leonard and Elko, who did a tremendous job last year, and they bring back a ton of experience. But on the flip side, they only beat 2 FBS teams with a winning record last year. I think they face 8 or 9 this year.
Yeah, the big surprise was the offense, right? I mean, this team last year, no one knew that how good they were going to be with quarterback Riley Leonard. Now they're getting Jalen Calhoun back at wide receiver. Wide receiver Jordan Moore is coming back. And then their defense, I expected the defense with Mike Elko to be good, master of the 4-2-5 at Texas A&M and Notre Dame in previous years past. Now, somehow this team is an offensive team. They return 95% per tarp. They were 8th in havoc allowed. They don't beat themselves. This is a team that you can bet on. I know a lot of people are into this whole Duke regression. I mean, there's second order win totals, there's turnovers, there's lots of things that go your way, but maybe when you're disciplined, like Duke is, saying that you're top 10 in havoc allowed, meaning you don't fumble, you don't allow tackles for a loss, maybe that is something that is sustainable. So I do like Duke as a whole. I think that they can upset Clemson in the opener, even though it's a very large spread. That, Mike Elko is just going to be pumped up to the nines with that defense, the 4-2-5, the quarters coverage to go up against I'm sure he's just watching tape of Georgia dismantling Garrett Riley's office in the national championship. And that defense is 35th in defensive havoc. So I do like Duke. The problem about getting the championship game at Florida State, and then you go at Louisville, and Louisville is off a bye. 2 weeks later, you're going to North Carolina. And then, oh, by the way, in the sandwich in between all that is a home game on Thursday night against Wake Forest. It's not an easy schedule on the second half whatsoever. So I stayed away from Duke futures, probably going to end up taking them against Duke from a win total perspective. I actually make it 6.5, and they're over 6.5 plus 130. So I haven't taken any action on Duke. I do like them. I believe in my projections, so you should take an over at plus 130 with plus money. But at the same time, I do not like the second half of that schedule.
Yeah, I'm not, on paper, I thought I was going to be fading Duke this year, right? Like after all
they have the best
hype
punter
last year. Yeah, they do have a 4-year really good punter. Their kicker has been shaky, but I like their special teams. But yeah, I looked into it. I like Elko. I like their quarterback. I like Johns. And this is the second year for this entire staff with a super experienced team. Right side of the offensive line has some questions. The secondary, losing Hayward will hurt, but their star linebacker, they do lose a lot at corner, but their pass D wasn't great last year, especially when you consider who they played. And they bring in a couple transfers who, if they hit, right, Blades from Miami, Jones from Texas A&M, their secondary could be better in that Elko system. And he's going to, generate a lot of it is was scheme based with that defense, that just the improvement. They went from giving up 40 points to 21-22 just in 1 year. Part of that was schedule, but a lot of that scheme and the pressures and the simulated pressures that Elko designed. So yeah, I'm not looking to fade Duke, would actually lean over. And if you want to get crazy, you can say, hey, I'm going to just take a shot and have some fun with some couch change on Duke and just hope that they beat Clemson in that opener, because then you're in a pretty good spot the rest of the way. The next team that we'll look at in that second tier to see if we can make a case for is North Carolina. North Carolina win total over 8.5 plus 110. They are, I believe, let me double check. Yeah, they're the third favorite in the ACC at 9-10-1. The simple case, if I just want to sum it up, is you have arguably, why would you back UNC? You have arguably the best quarterback in the country. For my money, I think he's the best pro prospect. And the defense can't get any worse. Like, you lose a ton of talent in the secondary. They couldn't stop, but last year the D couldn't stop the run. They couldn't get to the quarterback. They couldn't defend the pass. That's a pretty bad combo. The defense couldn't do anything right. So they got a good linebacking core. They're going to try and plug and play in the secondary. It can't get any worse. Like, we'll see what they do schematically. It was a weird team last year. The other thing is that they scored 40 points per game the first 10 games, only 20 the last 4. A lot of that was teams. They gave kind of what defenses did is they gave Drake May the Patrick Mahomes treatment. When Mahomes was just shredding everyone, and you see this throughout the NFL, they said, all right, we're not going to blitz you. We're dropping everyone back. We're going to take away the explosive play, make you beat us underneath. And May struggle with that. So we'll see the adjustment there. Still a really talented offense, even though they do lose Downs and Green at receiver. I still think they're fine on offense. It's the defense. Can the defense just become a little bit better? And then you have, Drake May, one of the best quarterbacks. I don't think 9-1 is enough. A little bit too much love for Drake May, but it is a super experienced team on paper. What are you seeing with the Heels?
I have problems with the coordinators. I have serious problems with the coordinators. So everyone knows Gene Chizik over on the defensive side of the ball. This is a defense that finished 120th in success rate last year, 124th in defensive finishing drives, and oh, by the way, third worst nationally in havoc. So Gene Chizik, I don't know if he's just too busy golfing down in South Carolina or what he's doing, but I think the other thing too is they have one of the lowest blitz rates in the nation, 17%, and they had one of the lowest success rates in creating pressure at 42%. I don't see any reason this defense is going to turn around and all of a sudden dazzle us with something new. But I guess we can see from that they do have a couple good linebackers that are coming back. Some questions definitely in the secondary, and then on the offensive side with Chip Lindsey. I went back and looked at the offenses that he coached back at Troy from 2019 to 2021, and they averaged about 107th in tempo. What is the Drake May offense? And look, wide receiver Nate McCollum, he's going to be great. Running back Omarion Hampton, he's going to be great. But what is this offense running 10, 11, 12 inside, outside zone at 107th in tempo? It's just not the Phil Longo offense that we've seen in North Carolina in years past. So I have a lot of questions about this team, and it's definitely not something where I'm trying to take an over here, even though my projections are a little bit higher than what the market is. I am not trying to back a team that just finished 128th in defensive havoc and is completely taking tempo out of their offensive game.
Yeah, they do have a tricky opening month. They play South Carolina, App State, Minnesota, then they're at Pitt to open ACC play. So there's no real gimmies there. They're in North Carolina for every game but 2, interestingly enough. They do avoid Florida State, but they go to Clemson, NC State. There's only 4 road games, so there's some things to like about the schedule, even though there is a tough opening. I think that if you like this North Carolina,
Kentucky, blindly, do you want to take rushing teams like Appalachian State and Minnesota against this defensive front seven? I mean, that would make me nervous. Like they're going to be favored in those games, but I mean, I would just be nervous against those kinds of rushing attacks.
Yeah, team I don't really like as a favorite, but we'll probably like them as an underdog. I think I like them in the opener, which is probably how I'll attack North Carolina against South Carolina in Charlotte, but we'll get to that later. Let's move on to, let's see, let's go to NC State. On paper, so coming into the season, I said to myself, this is the time to buy NC State. Now you were NC State you were head of the fan club last year, betting them win national titles. Devin Leary, Heisman. I don't know what kind of an NC State exposure you ended up with, but this is kind of the post-hype team that now comes under the radar. I think like this is the team. This is the spot that Dave Doran, similar to Wake Forest, we'll get to, kind of thrives in. There's not a lot of hype or pressure, and I kind of like buying into these post-hype teams that disappointed. I trust. Look, they lost some talent, some real talent on that defense, but I just trust Gibson in that 3-3-5. They have a star player at every level. The offense, I think, is going to be, I do have some questions at receiver, but I think it's going to be better because I'm just a believer in the Anae Armstrong reunification, where I can't even look how rusty I am. Armstrong and Anae reuniting. Armstrong was a mess last year, but I'm not putting any of that on him. He thrived under Anae. I think this offensive scheme will be a lot better. And I don't know. Over 6.5. It is juiced to the over. It was at 7.5. I probably wouldn't have bet it, but the market has come down on NC State. They are 20-1 to win the ACC. I just trust it's so inexperienced defense, and I trust Gibson, and I think that the quarterback offensive coordinator in the post-hype days down there in Raleigh, I think I'm buying NC State. Now, they do, and look, this is an underrated home field advantage. They host Notre Dame, Louisville, Clemson, Miami, and UNC while avoiding Florida State. They also have a bye before Clemson, and it's a very manageable road schedule. UConn, UVA, Duke, Wake Forest, and Virginia Tech. So, and all of those are regionally based. So, yeah, I think I'm buying NC State. Agree or disagree?
They got a bye before Clemson. I mean, there are advantages on the schedule. I make this number exactly 5.9, which is pretty in line with the market. So I can't say there's going to be a play on me. What would make me nervous is the amount of Brennan Armstrong turnovers, because we're used to NC State Wolfpack not being a turnover machine on offense. Devin Leary is going to fit at Kentucky great because he's not a real havoc allowed kind of quarterback. But now, you've got two new guards on the offensive line. You got some questions at wide receiver, and you got Brennan Armstrong, who's going to escape and try to make as many plays as possible. And if you can sit there and handicap whether he's going to have 30 turnover worthy plays or only 5 fumbles on the season, then you're more dialed in than anybody. But no, there's definitely no hate on Tony Gibson and his nickel package that he runs. He's got a really good success rate with the blitz that he sends. They do lose 41. They only have 41% of the defense coming back, but they still have, some of the Peyton Wilson at linebacker is going to be the leader there. So I don't expect any fall off. No play for me. I'm pretty much in line with the market on this team, but I hate putting preseason money when you have a quarterback like Brennan Armstrong, because the variance, right? I mean, we could have 7 touchdowns one game, we could have 6 turnovers the next, and the variance really makes it kind of a game to game, see what kind of defense you're going up against.
Yeah, one thing that I'll say that does make me a little bit nervous is get another special teams mention out here early in the season, is they do lose their star kicker, a Luke Rosa. Didn't he win the Luke Rosa? I should know because I voted for it. Yes, he won the Luke Rosa last year in Dunn. So that could be a big loss in some close games, which I expect NC State to play. But as of right now, I haven't pulled the trigger. I'm leaning to buying the post-hype Wolfpack. All right, let's move on to another team in that second tier in the ACC. Louisville, over 8 wins, -110. They are 10-1, right there with UNC in that next tier to win the ACC. The first thing you got to mention with Louisville is it's a brand new staff. It's a brand new identity. With Braum coming in, I think it's an enormous upgrade. I was not a Satterfield guy. I think the offense will be better. I think we saw the discipline and penalty issues that Louisville had. I don't know if it'll translate right away, but I think this was a net positive move and coaching regime switch for Louisville. For what it's worth, they are one of 2 teams in the ACC with new head coaches with Georgia Tech, although Georgia Tech, is a interim and Key, who was, so they're really the only team that has a brand new head coach. There are also 8 new offensive coordinators in the conference, 4 new defensive coordinators. Louisville has 1 of each. And there are 8 new quarterbacks in the ACC. And there are only 2 teams that have the same head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and quarterback. That's Florida State and Virginia Tech. But Louisville, a lot of change, schematic changes on both sides of the ball. They're changing schemes on defense. It's going to be a new offense, but at least we have another reunion with Brom and Plummer, who were both at Purdue. Plummer made a stop on the West Coast and now rejoins Brom in Kentucky. So what are your thoughts on Louisville?
Love them. Absolutely love them. When win totals came out back in May, I was throwing dimes at over 7. This number is at over 8. I would continue to fire. And I expect massive improvement on the defensive side of the ball with Ron English, Mark Hagan coming in. Louisville finished 122nd in tackle grading. That's all Satterfield's staff. That's all that is. I expect that to improve. But when you look at this, the star of this team, now they did finish 14th in portal ranking, right? I mean, Brom's coming in. He's got his own guys. He went to the portal and got his own quarterback, and he's going to have his own flavor here. And it might take a couple games to get that going, which is why I'm really laying off this number against Georgia Tech in week 1. It's too short. It's too low. I think Louisville could rout them, but at the same time, it's game 1 on the road. I'm not going to touch that. So the star of this Louisville team is the schedule. 3rd easiest schedule of offenses in the ACC. They don't play Florida State. They don't play North Carolina. They don't play Clemson. If I remember right, Jeff Brom got Purdue to the conference title game in the Big Ten because he didn't play Michigan or Ohio State. There's going to be a bit of an uptick here in pace with totals with Purdue. I'm sorry, there's going to be an uptick in pace with Louisville. Purdue's offense was just inside the top 50. That's going to be faster than what Louisville is used to. They have the best center in the ACC and Brian Hudson. Running back Jawar Jordan is one of the best, most elusive, and creates tons of missed tackles here. This is one of the softest schedules I can pick out. Georgia Tech, Murray State, Indiana to start the season, please.
Georgia Tech's in Atlanta. Indiana's in Indianapolis, not on campus. Yeah, they are the clear schedule lottery winners in the ACC.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, avoid Clemson, Florida State, and UNC. Only 3 true road games against NC State, Pitt, and Miami, which doesn't have a great home field advantage. Maybe they are good by the end of the year and it's a little better. They also have a bye before Duke, which is worth noting. So yes, they have the ACC. They are clearly the schedule winners. They had a great transfer class as well. I do worry a little bit about, look, their defense was very underrated last year. They led the nation in sacks with 50, but they did lose 33 and a half of those sacks. They lost a lot of talent. They must to the NFL on that defense, and Diaby, Abdullah. They also lost Clark at cornerback. And, they lost, they had 3 offensive line starters, but I think that they did a really good job in the portal. I'm a big fan of Brom. I'll let you continue your love fest for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I love it too. Everything that you stated, Brom is, I believe in his career, he's positive against the spread. I think he's 66-44 straight up lifetime. But there's a lot of good players here that have come together. The schedule is conducive to where they should be firing on all cylinders. There's a prop out there to make the ACC championship game. I'm not sure where you hedge, because what's the toughest game on this schedule when it comes to an ACC perspective? Because you don't count Kentucky, that game at the end against Kentucky. Virginia Tech, Virginia at home, I'm not worried about that. You get Duke at home off of a bye. At Pitt, at NC State. This Florida State or Clemson is going to take a loss. And if Louisville runs the table on this ACC schedule, which isn't asking much, they're in. So I wouldn't hurt anybody for not buying a prop here on Louisville to make the championship game.
Yeah, I do worry. Look, they get Georgia Tech early, who can be a little feisty. They're going to be, that's in Atlanta. Louisville's going to be over a touchdown favorite, but not much. and then, but their schedules is easy early on because which is so big because they're going to have a drastic offensive identity change, right? And then they're also changing schemes on defense, but that could create, some growing pains early on. I mean, you're going from Cunningham to and the Satterfield offense to Plummer and the Brom offense. That's a pretty significant change across the board on offense. But then you look at the schedule early on and leading up to at NC State, as long as they can get by that tricky, Georgia Tech can be a feisty team. That would be the game that I'd be worried about early on before you get to at NC State, Notre Dame, at Pitt, which is a tough stretch, before a fairly easy finish down the stretch. But yeah, that's the only thing I would worry about is just, hey, is there going to be some growing pains early? And they got to replace that aggressive sack production that they had last year. And I'm not completely sold on the wide receiver group, but I do trust Brom, right? Like Higgins, Bruce, and Thrash. Like, are we really? We're just saying Thrash is an all ACC receiver all of a sudden. He would get one target a game at Georgia State. So I do have some questions there, but I trust Brom. So I don't hate your Louisville hate, or I should say, I don't hate your Louisville love. Let's move on to another team that has been significantly disappointing in recent years, especially last year, where they could not cover a game to save their life. Talking about the Miami Hurricanes, win total sitting 7.5 or over 7.5 plus 125, 20-1 to win the ACC at BetMGM. This is, look, it's still the same head coach, Amaro Cristobal, but a complete shakeup from a staff perspective. I think you have 7 new assistants, including a new offensive coordinator and new defensive coordinator. We know how the Josh Gaddis experiment ended last year. Now we have the air raid coming to
How does Josh Gaddis and Dan Enos keep getting jobs? They just keep, I mean, you and I have been in this position for 6 years, and I think these guys have had 12 jobs.
Yeah, they must have some nudes stored away. But yeah, I cannot wait to get to Arkansas when we do our SEC betting preview coming up so we can talk more Dan Enos. But anyway, back to Miami. 2 new. I like the hires. I think they're both upgrades. 2 new aggressive coordinators. Cristobal, I think he's always going to be able to recruit. It's a talented team. Great freshman class. They could start 5-0. It's Miami of Ohio, Texas A&M at home. They'll be close to touchdown underdogs. Bethune-Cookman at Temple, then Georgia Tech. You start 5-0, then all of a sudden because last year it was like this team said, I'm done, I quit, and there were locker room issues reported.
Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee State debacle. So we're gonna see if this is the new staff, a new year, a new lease on life, and they're similar to NC State, and now they're little post hype, they're going a little more under the radar. Can we see an improved Miami team? I think what it comes down to now, if you just look at the schedule, they play all the top teams in the ACC, which isn't great. And they also get Clemson off of a bye. I do think their floor should be, 5 wins. So basically it's like if they even go over 7.5, can they go 3-4 against these teams? You say their floor is 5 wins, and the 5 games they should win. Although Miami probably should expect a game that they will lose that you don't expect them to. But Texas A&M at home, at UNC, Clemson at home, off a bye, at NC State, at Florida State, at Boston College in the finale, and Louisville at home. Can they get 3 wins there? I think a lot of it is going to come down to who is Tyler Van Dyke, right? 2 years ago, he looked great, but who was it against? Last year, he did not, but he was not healthy and was in a horrendous system, just in a terrible situation. So trying to reconcile those 2 seasons is very difficult, right? Looked great, but against nobody. Last year looked awful, but was injured and in a bad situation. Can Van Dyke get back to who we saw he was when he flashed 2 years ago in this new air raid offense? Because there are some things to like about this Miami team. What are your thoughts on the Hurricanes?
Well, I think they made the correct hire on both sides of the ball. Shannon Dawson's coming in to be the OC. He was the former OC for Houston and Dana Holgerson. So you're going to see a lot of Clayton Tune, power raid, 11, 10, inside zone running. I think this is all really good for TVD. It was just a dreadful season last season. I think you wiped the board on that because we saw against lower level competition what Tyler Van Dyke can do 2 years ago when he came in to be the starter. So I think he can return to that. And from considering that, Clayton Tune did so well in the wake of De'Ara King and Shannon Dawson had a big part of that, I think that the offense is going to be okay. 69% returns on the offensive side of the ball per tarp. They've really got to work on their rush explosives. They were only 126 in that category. So some work there for Dawson to do. On the defensive side of the ball, I love it. Absolutely love it. Former Marshall defensive coordinator. You want to know why Notre Dame lost to Marshall? You want to know why Marshall was a thorn in everybody's ass? It was Lance Guidry as a defensive coordinator. So he's going to come in, ran a lot of 3-3-5, 4-2-5, a nickel package with quarters and cover 3. 94% of the defensive production is back. We're talking PBUs, stops, tackles, pressures. They were pretty bad at tackling outside the top 100 per PFF, but they get a lot of those players back. And like I said, coverage and tackling grading on PFF are coach dependent. You get lazy in those things, it's all a reflection of the coach. It's not a reflection of the players. So you're getting Cristobal's gone out and got really good coordinators. We'll see if Dawson can pull it off with TVD, but I think they're on the up. The problem is my projected win total, even with the power rating, a little bit of power rating bumps that I gave them for coordinators and for returning production on the defensive side of the ball, I still have a projected win total that's underneath 7. So I can't in no way on this schedule that includes a Clemson, Florida State, Louisville stretch on the back half. I can't get them to 8 wins, which you would need to have to get the over on a juice on a 7.5. So it's a no play for me on Miami, but it's a team that I'm looking to play on in the first half of the schedule, possibly against Texas A&M.
Boom, ding, 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 ding. Yeah. So I lean over on that. My numbers don't quite get there. But I'd rather just play them week 2 against Texas A&M, and hopefully Texas A&M, all of the frustrations that they felt last year, they come out and they take New Mexico behind the woodshed and absolutely clobber the Lobos, which Texas A&M has been known to do against these really, I've seen some Jimbo teams do this before, but yeah, give me like a 59-0 against New Mexico. Texas A&M wins. They look great. And Miami, new offensive scheme. I trust Cristobal to get the offensive line together. A lot of moving pieces there. Also, like you said, defense returns a lot of production. They also had some promising, a lot of experience at D-line and safety that I like. And I like what they did in the portal at linebacker and at cornerback. There are a lot of pieces for that defense to work with. But there could be a little bit of growing pains, maybe some sloppiness in the opener. So give me like Miami against Miami, Ohio in the opener. Give me Miami by like 8, sneak it out, don't look great, and then Texas A&M 59-0, and then we get the 7 week 2, and yes, that's what we're hitting. That's how I want to play this team as well.
I do too. The problem is that Miami Ohio game in week 1 for the Hurricanes is on Friday night. It's going to get a lot of national TV pub because it's on Friday night. So
yeah, so we need them to struggle.
Yeah, I would love for the Hurricanes to struggle. I'm with you. I'm not buying the game of the year but I am definitely, it's probably going to be the first bet off the board for week 2, because I'm telling you, in front of the scenes, what you guys have been seeing with Texas A&M and what I'm hearing behind the scenes, there is a potential chance, not of thunderstorms, but of a complete shit show going on with Texas A&M. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yep. We will get to that along with more Dan Enos coverage when we get to the SEC. Betting previews.
Blocked on Twitter, by the way, by Dan Enos. Right after the whole podcast.
Amazing. Wait, maybe I'll try to get Dan Enos on for that episode. All right. No, I would not, because there needs to be some slander. All right, let's stay in that second tier. And let's talk Pitt over 7 -115, 25-1 to win the ACC. What's noteworthy here? Another reunion, another quarterback reunion with Jerkovich and Signetti. Again, similar to questions that we have with Van Dyke. Who is Phil Jerkovich? It's like the Mr. Who is Phil Jerkovich? He was hurt. Again, was he hurt last year? Was he not as good as we saw a couple of years ago? We're going to see this year. As we said before, last year I was on Pitt under. I did get there, but generally speaking, when Pitt's in this range, if they're always going to win like 8 games, but when Pitt's in this range, I don't like to bet their win totals because like they're going to win a game or two that they shouldn't, and they're going to lose a game or two that they shouldn't. Just like this is what Narduzzi does. They did go 9-4 last year. They were 3-2 in one possession games. Is Jerkovich healthy, and can he stay healthy? The offensive line has a lot of experience. The D lost a lot of talent to the NFL. I mean, Cansey, Hill, Baldonado, Alexander, Hallett, Wilkes, Dennis, but they tend to just reload and be fine. That's what Pitt does. Still have a lot of depth on that defensive line, just no stars have emerged yet. 2 or 3 starters back at linebacker. They do both cornerbacks back, but they have questions at safety. But again, like you just kind of trust that the Pitt defense will be okay. It all comes down to Jerkovich from a schedule perspective. If Jerkovich is okay, really good chance. I shouldn't say really good, but a decent chance they could start 7-0. If Jerkovich is healthy and firing, it's Wofford at home, Cincy at home, at West Virginia, North Carolina at home, at Virginia Tech, Louisville at home, at Wake Forest, and then before a stretch of at Notre Dame and Florida State, and then a pretty easy stretch to end the season with Syracuse, Boston College, then at Duke. Only 3 true ACC road games. A lot of coin flips from when I project their spread. So like another reason why I don't want any part of this win total, because it really just comes down to what kind of year Jerkovich has. I do like that they're both of their lines should be good, so they should be good in the trenches. They're super deep there too. And they did lead in the second half of all 3 ACC losses last year. They could have beat Tennessee. What are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Panthers and your beloved Narduzzi?
Yeah, I definitely projected lower than the 7 that's in the market. There's just too many losses on the defensive side when you lose Servassier, Dennis, and Brandon Hill, and they had some of the best defense. I love that defense. It's the reason I was on them last year. They're just
I think 7 guys on the defense are on an NFL roster right now.
Yeah, and that's why I think per tarp we had them about 22% returning production on and transfer activity on the defensive side, and they were 4th in defensive havoc. Now it's a Narduzzi defense. It's Randy Bates calling the plays, high 34% blitz rate. They're above 50% on success in creating pressure. That's going to continue, but they took a hit in power rating because of how much they lost on defense. Although we haven't really ever seen Pitt or Narduzzi's defenses, no matter the stop that he's been at, really kind of fall off. So this comes down to Jerkovich. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? I mean, so highly touted coming into Notre Dame. I think you go back to the old story where Brian Kelly did not want him to be quarterback. Tommy Rees did want him to be quarterback. He exits to Boston College. Nothing happens there. Signetti gets him to come over to Pitt. So it's probably time for him to re-up his NFL draft stock. Problem is, I just can't make it. I mean, they have a pretty good offensive line, an offensive tackle, and they've got a pretty good wide receiver in Kanata Mumfield. So, I can't get up to get them to 8 wins. I can't get them to 7 wins. I would play the under here. The problem is, you're right. They end up beating teams that they should not beat. Can they win at Notre Dame on the road on October 28th? Sure. Can they beat Florida State? They could also beat
Florida State, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you get a little bit of shitty weather and Pitt and Florida State comes up there, absolutely they can win that game. So it's a no play for me. If I had to play it, I'd play the under.
Yeah, I didn't downgrade the D as much. I could see why you did, which is why I don't show any value on their let me double check that before I say it. I don't think I did. Let's see. Yeah, I don't show any value on their win total either way. I didn't regress their D as much as some might have, just because it just works. Like their defensive line has a lot of depth. They still have 2 really good corners, and that's like kind of the foundation of the Bates D. They're gonna play a lot of quarters. They're gonna leave their corners on islands, and then they're gonna blitz and then bring pressure. And so they still have the defensive line. They have 2 or 3 linebackers back. And then they have 2 good corners. Like, so I do have questions about safety. And then obviously it's just a ton of talent. Like, there's a talent drop off, but they just somehow there's going to be 2 guys that emerge up front, and they're going to be fine. So we'll see. I'll be interested to see how that defense looks on the first couple of weeks. You know, maybe against Cincinnati, West Virginia, North Carolina will be a really good test at home in week 4. So yeah, it's a pass for me on Pitt. It'll just come down to Jerkovich and whether or not, like, they're going to win. I think 6 is their floor. And then like 9 is their ceiling. And it just comes down to Jerkovich. And then which did they win 2 games they shouldn't have and lose 1, or did they lose 2 and win 1? So yeah, I think it's a team that we just focus on during the season, pass from a pre-season betting perspective. So that'll do it for the second tier of teams. We talked Clemson, Florida State right off the bat as the class of the ACC. And then we kind of made cases for or against in the second tier of UNC, Duke, NC State, Louisville, Miami, Pitt. I guess we could throw Wake in there, but I kind of separated in 50 to 1 and lower as the third tier. But Wake's win total is over 6.5. Choose to the under. They're over 6.5 plus 120, 50 to 1 to win the ACC at BetMGM. The big storyline with Wake Forest is they lose Sam Hartman at quarterback. You're going to have Mitch Griffiths take over. And there are some questions in the trenches on both sides of the ball, which is what I'm a little worried about. I love Lambert as DC, but there's some questions on defense as well. Wake Forest is one of those teams, though, that has no hype now. It's like, hey, Hartman's gone, sort of like NC State, right? But this is what Clawson thrives in, like, right? The team that just no one believes in, and they're just going to win the games that they should, probably pull off an upset. And I show a little value on the under. I think it's just, I loved Hartman. I'm not a huge Griffiths guy. Some people like him. I'm not. The wide receiver room still should be fine, even though they lost Perry. It is a rebuilt defensive line. I do have questions about the offensive line, which could be really problematic for Griffiths. But they've gone to a bowl game in 7 straight years. I'm very confident Clawson will find a way to give them the 6 wins. Yeah. So do I want to bet under 6.5 minus 145 and just hope they don't get to 7? Probably not. I'll probably look to for them or in the season. It's not a very experienced team. I think they're outside the top 100 in overall experience. What are you seeing? I also, by the way, last year, if you want to look at some regression, their red zone efficiency was through the roof last year. And a lot of that was Hartman, and he kind of masked some of the issues that were on the offensive line. That their red zone efficiency could drop precipitously. And I'm also worried about their special teams, their kicker with field position and long field goals. Yeah, I like Lambert, but I still have questions about this defense for sure. What do you see with Wake Forest?
Well, the offensive side of the ball scares me. And I do have I project this 5.9 wins. I would take under 6.5 minus 120. That'd be the limit.
Yeah, I'm at 5. I'm at 5.8. So I'm right with you.
Yeah, it's an under. You're not going to find 7 wins on this schedule, but I hate counting out Dave Clawson because he covers against the spread a lot. You know, he was covering against spreads before Sam Hartman was even around. How much does this offense change? Because Warren Ruggiero has been there since 2014, and he runs a lot of man run schemes with only 6 in the box. It's not a real heavy box, but he still runs it a lot. He had a high 34% RPO rate with Sam Hartman, but are you still running mesh RPO with this? I don't know, this box of crayon quarterback names that we've got here. There's so many names that could play quarterback here this season, especially if there's an injury up to Mitch Griffiths here to the beginning. But, you know, they had a high 23%.
Yeah, Griffiths is like that has the body of like a high schooler, and there's some questions on the offensive line. So we'll see if he can.
Well, a new center, a new right guard, and you're what, 5'11", 190, Mitch Griffiths, and he's going to run the mesh RPO. That's not going to work. Maybe against Elon on Thursday night in the opener, but that's not going to work against Clark Lee's Vanderbilt defensive front. So I'm nervous. I would be nervous backing Wake Forest, considering, you know, of course there's a drop off from Sam Hartman, but when you throw the center and the right guard in there, and then I look at the sizes of these guys that are filling out this, it would make me a little bit nervous. So, and you're right, 5th in offensive finishing drives, one of the best in the nation after the 40-yard line of getting points up on the board, taking touchdowns, not field goals. And, on defense, we love Brad Lambert. There will be no negative for defensive coordinator Brad Lambert, who came in, ran his nickel package, a lot of cover one. He's one of the only coaches that runs cover one, really messes with quarterbacks' heads on the other side. He runs one of the highest rates of blitz at 40%, and he hit home more than 50% of the time. I mean, he is an excellent defensive coordinator. So I don't expect a lot of drop off there, even though they're only returning 41%. And they were second in PFF pass rush last year. But take that all back. I just don't know where you're coming up with the points against some of these teams that are on your schedule. So I'm saying under 6.5, and I am going to be putting probably just a 2-unit play on it into the Action app after this. I kind of wanted to just talk with you and confirm with you as one of the ones I was a little kind of tweening on. So, but I am.
Yeah, I think I'm going to bet this as well after hearing your take also. But yeah, I mean, Clawson scares me a little bit, but like, I think if they overachieve a little bit, they're going to get their bowl eligibility, win 6 games. Like, but I wouldn't be shocked if they won 4 or 5. I'd be more shocked if they won 8 than 3. And like, if you look at their schedule, like they got Clemson, Florida State, Duke, and NC State. Only avoid UNC out of the top projected 5. They're at Duke on a short week after playing Florida State. Tough spot. They're also at Notre Dame, who's coming off of a bye the week before. At Tech is the week after at Clemson. Tough spot. So, like, there's some tricky spots in here. Now, they could start
Carrier Dome at the Carrier Dome. I mean, that's rough.
Yep. After at Notre Dame. So the schedule is tough now. And I also think that there's going to be some growing pains, obviously. Rebuilt defensive line, offensive line questions, the Hartman transition. And then, like, so you could see some growing pains early, and then they could drop a game or two, and then you're sitting really pretty. Because if things go right, they could start 4-0, and then you're going to be sweating. But, they're going to beat Elon to open the season. Could easily lose to Vanderbilt in week 2. They could lose to at Old Dominion. That's a weird game. And then they got Georgia Tech, could lose that game. So I think as long as they lose one of those games, which I think will happen, then this under should get to the window. And even if they do start 4-0, there's still a really good shot. I think you can still keep them under 7 wins. So I agree with you on Wake under. Let's transition to the final 4 teams in the ACC at the bottom tier. Let's start with the aforementioned Syracuse. Orange, win total over 6.5, plus 145 at BetMGM. 66-1 to win the ACC. We have a new offensive coordinator here, and Jason Beck, who was the quarterback's coach. Their Garrett Schrader does return, although he missed spring practice with an injury. Your boy Tucker is gone at running back. Interesting team here. Babers was on the hot seat, kind of saved his job last year, basically just because they had a really easy early part of the schedule, and then they faded late. They do have 3 fairly easy non-conference games, and then they're at Purdue. It's Colgate, Western Michigan, and transitioning Army team at home, and then at Purdue. So some opportunities to start fast once again before you're hosting Clemson, and they've historically given Clemson some fits. At UNC, at Florida State, at Tech, 3 straight road games. Schedule then gets very tough in the middle. Some significant defensive losses. Williams, Jones, Chestnut, Carter really got hit hard via the portal. Pass D was so good last year. Not sure it will be as good. They will still play their 3-3-5 because they brought in Rocky Long as their new defensive coordinator, who is the architect of that defensive scheme. It's it's going to be a new offensive scheme though. It's going to be like a little bit of a nice pro style offense, and then a little bit of Dino's veer and shoot mixed in. So we'll see how that works out and see how healthy Schrader is. What do you see with Syracuse? Also some questions on the offensive line worth mentioning. What do you see here?
They got bumps in the power rating for me thanks to TARP and their second order win total. So there is some, whatever metrics you want to use for win probability at the end of their games, that's dictated they should have won more than they lost last year. And then their returning production, 71% on the offensive side of the ball, 64% on the defensive side of the ball, both of those at or above national average. So they did get some bumps. They didn't get a huge bump, but for me, somehow on this schedule, I project them to win 8 games, which means I'm going over 6.5 plus 125 is out there right now. I do love Garrett Schrader. I love the fact that he can tuck it and run and likes to run into people. I mean, obviously that could work out an injury situation, but he does have second team all ACC tight end Oronde Gadsden. I do like Rocky Long coming in. He's going to get Marlo Wax returning at linebacker, who created 27 pressures last season, but creating only 27 pressures is one thing, but in 825 defensive snaps, he missed just 10 tackles last year. That is the kind of guy that I think you can stick right there in the middle of Rocky Long's 3-3-5 defense. They're going to be heavy favorites over Colgate, Western Michigan, Army, BC. Listen, you want to throw Purdue in at the beginning of this schedule? There are some offensively inept teams that Syracuse is going to get to play off the top. So I think there can be some success for this defense. I kind of disagree that the back half of their schedule and where I power rate Pitt, Wake, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech is really where the difference is and how I got so high on Syracuse's total. Clear underdog, Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson. They're not going to win those games whatsoever, but they can beat Purdue early with a new offense and a new defensive system going on in there. I'm very bullish on Syracuse this year.
Yeah, I'm not quite there. And yeah, I don't mind the bottom half of their schedule. I mean, I project them at, let's see, and by the way, I project them at 6.9. So I would lean over. And by the way, you can find over 6.5 plus 145 at BetMGM. But I didn't regress, similar to Pitt. I didn't regress this defense as much as maybe some have, just because Rocky Long, just his defenses are always going to figure it out. I am worried about the secondary. They had some really important losses, but they just and then Jones was the heart of their D. I like the punter ad, and you got to find a kicker. So I do have some questions, but Rocky Long just always figures it out. But I'm not quite there. That middle, they got to start fast. That middle part of the schedule, like even at Va Tech after Clemson, at UNC, at Florida State, third straight road game at Va Tech, that's a tough spot. They do get Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech, which is what you want in the ACC, but both of them are on the road. So yeah, I'm neutral on Syracuse, but don't mind your over bet, even though I'm not as high on the Orange. Let's talk Va Tech. Over 5.5 plus 115, 100-1 to win the ACC at BetMGM. You do have Grant Wells back at quarterback, but he might not be the guy. And you have Baylor transfer Drones in the mix as well. I think he came out and said, I think today, that he doesn't really know who's the guy yet. Maybe they're going to have a guy that they use in certain packages. So there's still questions at quarterback and who's going to be the guy. And we know Grant Wells is an enigma. I think I like some of the transfers they had at wide receiver, the offensive line, a lot of questions. Only 2 starters. They're moving more to center. They need to find some guards, keep their tackles healthy. That could make this whole thing fall apart quickly, assuming even the quarterback position works out. It's going to be a run first, play action heavy offense under Pry. And you're going to have a new play caller. Pry did it until the last game last year. We'll see if that can have some positive results. And the defense just needs to find a way to generate turnovers, havoc, and pass rush, which was really lacking last year. They were 1-4 in one possession games. They were 113th in turnover margin. But a lot of that was just, hey, Wells just will shit the bed every once in a while. So We'll see what Va Tech looks like this year. They do avoid Clemson, UNC, Duke, and Miami. They're at Florida State, which is almost certainly a loss, and at Louisville is probably a loss. But on paper, if quarterback position works out, you can generate a little more havoc on D and the offensive line pieces come together. The other 10 games are all winnable on paper. So there is some upside with this Va Tech team. There's also some downside. So there's a lot of coin flip games in here. Just look at their start. Old Dominion at home, Purdue at home, at Rutgers, at Marshall, Pitt at home. These are games they could start 1-4, 3-2, a lot of variance in that early part of the schedule. What do you see with the Hokies here? A lot of some staff shakeups, maybe a quarterback shakeup. Basically, you're betting on, can they get to bowl eligibility with a win total of over 5.5 plus 115.
Yeah, I say no. If Grant Wells is not going to be the starter, then, Drones can possibly get the shot. He was pretty highly recruited, highly ranked, and so was Pop Watson, who played in the spring game. So quarterback, we just have no clue. And even when they start the season, it could be somebody else once we get into play. Brent Pry went and tapped Tyler Bowen to be the offensive coordinator, someone he worked with at Penn State. So you can expect a lot of gap schemes, inside zone, running out of 11. Offense only returns 44%. There is a swinging door here, a revolving door of players in, players out. Makes it really hard to try to predict what this team is going to do. I did come in. I came to a projected win total of 4. And so the under 5 at plus 100 would have, some play on it for me. I think this is a team that, since I don't know much about what they're going to line up at quarterback, and also their big running back they got through the portal, Bashan Tootin. I think he was at NCA&T. I mean, yep. I'd like to see some film. I'd like to see more film against real defenses before I go and say this is the electric kid that's just going to sidestep everybody in the ACC play. So there's just not enough information for me here. There's not a lot of players on the defense, which is supposed to be, I would think, the specialty here, considering who your head coach is and where he came from. I would think that they would be better than what we've seen, but it can't get any worse on the offensive side. 129th in offensive finishing drives. There's nowhere to go but up from there. They were 25th in third down defense last year, so maybe it is showing out a little bit, but they don't have very much success. They have one of the lowest success rates in getting blitzes into pressure at 42% last year, running 4.25 and 4.3. So we'll see if Chris Marvay and Brent Pry can change that, but I don't have a lot of faith that they can. And this Virginia Tech roster, for what, the third season in a row since the pandemic, you never recognize these names over year after year after year. So we'll see, but definitely not any preseason investment for me.
Yeah, I mean, I basically, for what it's worth, the 3 of their final 4 games are on the road. They do have to play 3 teams off a bye, including, they have to play Syracuse off bye. They're also off a bye, but they also at Florida State. Florida State's coming off a bye, and then at Marshall. Marshall's coming off a bye early.
Wells goes against Marshall.
Yeah, Grant Wells revenge game at Marshall. Marshall will be coming off of a bye. My prediction, a lot of coin flips there.
You put a stake down on interception.
Yeah. What was that game? He had 5 interceptions in the first quarter. I think maybe it was against Rice. I think it was against Rice, and they lost. And now I got to look this up. Grant Wells interceptions. Rice. They were a huge favorite, and yeah, Marshall was ranked 15th. Wells threw 5 picks, and Rice. This was in 2020. Rice got its first win over a ranked team since 1997. They beat Marshall, who was ranked 15th at the time, 20-0. One of the weirdest games of that 2020 season. Anyway, my prediction, unless you your numbers are really off of the win total, or you have a really strong take on if Virginia Tech's going to be much better or worse than the market implies, I bet their bowl eligibility win total is going to come down to the finale at Virginia. So just wait to bet that game. All right. Let's move on to, speaking of what we had, I think I might have said Brent Key for Virginia Tech at one point, but it's Brent Pry. How are there 2 ACC coaches with first name Brents, 3-letter last names that both end in Y? What the hell are the chances of that? Anyway, Georgia Tech. Yeah, both at tech schools. Georgia Tech, coached by Brent Key, who took over last year and really did a tremendous job with what Georgia Tech had down the stretch. Did a lot of what I think Brom can do at Louisville, like some of the discipline, in-game coaching decisions, just structure, communication, fixed a lot of that. And Georgia Tech, the block punts, just getting the punt formation right, that you saw all those issues under Collins, like the mental errors, the in-game management. And Georgia Tech was able to finish 4-4, unfortunately for me, because I had their win total under, and I thought that was a lock. with Collins, and then they just turned it around under Key. They did go 4-1 in one possession games, and they were 6th in the country in turnover margin. Some potential negative regression looming there. Their win total over 4.5 plus 105, 150 to 1 to win the ACC. Sims is gone at quarterback, so you're going to have a quarterback battle there. Could be Harna, could be Haynes King, the Texas A&M transfer. A lot of questions with, can transfer slot in a wide receiver and linebacker? That'll probably go a long way in determining if Georgia Tech can exceed their win total of 4.5 from a schedule perspective. They avoid Florida State, but they do go to Clemson, and it's a pretty tough schedule, as it usually is with Georgia Tech, because they play Georgia in the finale at home. They're also at Ole Miss, and they only have 3 true ACC home games because they're starting off with Louisville in Atlanta to kick off their season. The wins that you feel confident about on the schedule, it's like South Carolina State at home, Bowling Green at home. I mean, even, they got to go to Virginia. You got BC and Syracuse at home. I'm right on market with this. Do you have any strong feel or takes with Georgia Tech?
I'm below the number of 4.5, depends on the juice that you're looking at, but I don't want to fade Brent Key and what he's doing, a former offensive line coach. This is his alma mater. And I don't want to fade them primarily. They covered 3 of their last 4, winning outright as a dog against Virginia Tech and North Carolina at the end of last year. They covered against Georgia in the season finale. I mean, the team played hard for Brent Key until the very end. He goes out and gets Southern Miss's OC, Buster Faulkner, to come in, do his 10-11 inside-outside zone. What we saw with Frank Gore Jr. at Southern Miss is what we're going to try to see out of Trey Cooley, who transferred in from Louisville, or Dante Smith, who's on the roster. But we'll see if that's going to work in the ACC, if you can score enough points fast enough. This team was bottom 10 in pass explosives last year. Haynes King is on the roster. Didn't know if he was one of the 10,000 quarterbacks that's on Texas A&M. Zach Gibson is still there. So we'll see who's going to be playing quarterback. But with an offensive line head coach and with a Southern Miss OC that was letting Frank Gore take 80% of the snaps, I expect we're going to see a pretty heavy ground unit. And that's going to have to go up against, some of these defenses I see on their schedule that may struggle to field a defensive front 7. So there are chances for wins here. So I'm not going to fade Georgia Tech when you have a young head coach that's alma mater, and he's getting the team to produce 3 covers in the month of November against teams like North Carolina and Georgia last year. I'm not going to fade him. Andrew Thacker's the defensive coordinator. They ran. He's crazy. They ran some cover 6 on over 10% of snaps last year. I actually had to go brush up on a cover 6. There's some interesting things going on both sides of the ball here. Not saying that the team is on the rise, but I certainly am not fading a team that plays really hard for their coach. Most of these offensive line coaches come in and they get the most out of their team. So not going to fade them, but I do project them lower than the 4.5 in the market. Oh, yeah. One thing to watch. I think one deliverable we should have is that Georgia Tech was up there in tempo. I think top 50 last year. Buster Faulkner was a Georgia analyst. I couldn't get a lot of background on him coming in and calling plays for offensive coordinator, but Georgia was 113th in pace under Todd Monken. So if Faulkner is going to try to take some sort of Georgia Bulldog template and apply it to Georgia Tech, we're really going to have to look at some unders here, because this would be one of the slowest paces. And when you consider the pace of Southern Miss when he was there too, this is completely different than what Georgia Tech's been running the last couple of years. So there could be a really good chance for Georgia Tech unders here early in the season until odds makers catch up.
Yeah, maybe in that first game against Louisville, who could have some growing pains on offense, the strength of the Georgia Tech defense is that secondary against the Brown passing attack. We'll see. They do have to replace their defensive end, White, who they lost the NFL, and 2 really good linebackers. It's going to come down to the quarterback, and then can transfers fit in a wide receiver and linebacker for what's going to determine, I think, Georgia Tech's success. But they're going to play hard. They're going to be a feisty underdog, and I would put a bet in that they'll pull off an upset or 2 this year. It might not be a sizable one, but they're going to be feisty and probably a good team to back as a dog. Quarterback battle worth watching. And finally, last and certainly least, we're going to finish up with Virginia. Win total 3.5, over 3.5 plus 125. They're 200 to 1 to win the ACC. Year 2 of Tony Elliott, which is not going well. it's amazing that offense didn't work last year with all that talent. And it still couldn't work this year. Can't say the same. They only bring back their running back, their tight end, and center. There's a quarterback battle between their backup Woolfolk and then a Monmouth transfer. I haven't even looked to see if there's been an update today. They're rebuilding their offensive line for a third straight year. Like, they added Kobe Pace. Like,
in pass blocking, 125th in pass blocking.
They have 17 returning starts on the offensive line. The D line's deep and they got some experience. They'll be able to generate some pressure. Like, they're gonna be a good underlook, I would imagine. But cornerback's certainly a question which could be problematic. And on the schedule, they do avoid FSU, Pitt, Clemson, and get to host NC State and Duke. So that is they are one of the schedule winners in the ACC. However, still doubt they are winning road games at Maryland, Tennessee, UNC, Louisville, Miami. I mean, even Boston College. They're most winnable games. You got James Madison at home, which won't be easy. NC State at home, William & Mary at home should be a win. Georgia Tech at home, Duke and Virginia Tech at home. Like, look, I know that they won the schedule lottery. Their defense, I think, is a little underrated. I'm a big fan of their coordinator, but this offense might be so inept. You could not pay me to bet Virginia's over. I lean under here. Not enough to pull the trigger unless you're going to convince me to do so. Not a fan of Elliott. Not a fan of this offense. And it's going to be another rough year in Charlottesville. What do you see here?
They could be underdogs at home to James Madison in week 2. I would be surprised. Boy, where do I start with these guys? I think if Advil was smart, they would give Virginia a call and say, can we be your primary sponsor? I started diving into what offensive coordinator Des Kitchings does and what Tony Elliott wants to do. And of course, they run a lot of 11, right? One running back, one tight end. Their second highest personnel is 0-2. No running backs and 2 tight ends. I don't even know what that is. Like, I had to go back and watch some film, which I think I blew a couple June days in this, but it's a mess. The offensive calling is a mess. Like I said, they're 125th in pass blocking. They've done nothing to address that through the portal. They finished 54th in portal ranking, 64th in national recruiting. So whatever Tony Elliott's got going on there, it's not improving. John Rodzinski is calling the plays on defense. About 26% blitz we can expect with a mid-range success. They don't run quarters coverage. They don't run cover 3. They only run cover 1. It's definitely very interesting. They were dead last in the nation in stuff rate. And I love me some stuff rate on defense, but you are the worst. And you're in the Power 5. You are a Power 5 program that is dead last and controlling the line of scrimmage when teams are trying to get their proper yards on their respective down and distance. I have no love for these guys. At the same time, they won the schedule lottery. I would actually much rather bet James Madison in week 2 instead of taking an under on these guys. Maybe get a point or 2 in the market. I can project it's going to be about a pick. I would much rather take underdogs on the schedule, like our round robin parlays that we're going to do weekly. I would much rather just pick 1 or 2 or 3 spots and fade Virginia and throw them in our round robins or play it outright against them than even attempt to try and take an over or under on this team, or even an under. Who knows? So you can count me in on our week 2 podcast, taking James Madison. You can count me in a couple of these spots that I'm looking on. There's you're coming off back-to-back travel to North Carolina and Miami, and then you're at home against Georgia Tech. That's a slammer on Georgia Tech. Considering your defense is dead last in stuff rate, and you're getting an offensive line coach in Georgia Tech coming at you, there's a lot of places to fade Virginia here.
Yeah, I mean, last year their defense was underrated, in my opinion, especially when you consider how bad the offense was. Like that, the offense being poor negatively affects the defense. And very aggressive D. They're going to get pressure. They're going to blitz. But that was the strong suit of the team last year. And then you lose your all-ACC linebacker, Jackson, to Iowa. And then you lose Cypress, the cornerback. They're another all-ACC player, to Florida State. And then you lose Anthony Johnson, another cornerback, to the NFL. So those are 3 massive losses on that defense.
Also, all their their PBUs, almost all their PBUs. They lost almost all of them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I no love for Virginia. Not enough to pull the trigger on the under, but it's under or nothing. This offense should be ugly. All right, that'll wrap up going through each of the teams in the ACC, all 14 of them. Before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. We're going to do this for all of our the Power 5 conference previews. So first down, we'll do week 1 or week 0 for first down, and that can be a bet that you like. It could be a game of the year line as well, if there's nothing you like in that conference for week 0 or week 1. For second down, we're going to do a favorite over or future in that conference. And for third down, we're going to do our favorite under that you like. And if you don't love an under, you can just say which one you would bet if you had to. But let's start off with week 0-1 ACC related bet that you would like to call out now. I'll start. I'm just going to throw out a little teaser for our SEC betting previews. We're going to have 2, by the way. We'll do 1 for each division. I'm going to throw out North Carolina under a field goal. I do think the North Carolina defense will be better just because it can't get any worse. I'm still a big fan of Drake May, but this is more so a fate of South Carolina early on. With Drake May in my back pocket, just needing to basically win this game. But I'll save the rest of that take for the SEC preview. Colin, anything you want to mention for week 0-1 that's ACC related?
Yeah, I'm taking Thursday night, August 31st. I'm going to go UConn plus 16 against NC State. This is a number that I make at 7. I would expect this to continue to steam down. With UConn, you're going to get a lot of experience, although not efficient. You're still going to get a bowl team with a lot of experience coming back, taking on an NC State team that has a new offensive coordinator, has a new quarterback. And yes, they're going to be able to produce. But in the first 2 or 3 quarters of this game against UConn's defense, I expect them to have a little bit of hiccups coming out of the gate. You have an offensive line that's got to learn new blocking schemes. UConn plus 16 is too high considering the nature of this game and how good the Tony Gibson 3-3-5 defense is for NC State. I don't expect a lot of points in this whatsoever, making 16 a real premium here with what should be a really low total.
Yeah, it could be a good first half spread or money line look as well. Good stuff there. Let's move to second down in the ACC. We're going to go with our favorite over or future. I could make a case for Duke as a future, but couldn't quite get there. So my favorite over, I'm going to go. A team we didn't even talk about, so this is perfect. The one team that we missed was Boston College. We didn't even get to. This is how rusty I am. We only talked to 13 to 14 teams, but it's perfect because Boston College is actually my favorite over of any ACC team. I do like NC State as well. Disagree with you, I think, on that one. I like the new offensive coordinator quarterback combination. And I just trust Gibson in that defense. And it's kind of the post-hype NC State team. They're going to fly under the radar. All their toughest opponents at home, manageable road schedule. So I'll throw out NC State, but also Boston College. What this comes down to is, look, they did lose Jerkovich, but he was awful last year, mainly because the offensive line was a disaster. It was a brand new offensive line. You got 4 freshmen out there. Should be a significantly improved offensive line. Good new offensive line coach coming in. A lot more experience there. And look, we saw Moorhead very efficient down the stretch at quarterback. You do lose a star receiver in Flowers. But I think just because of the offensive line, the offense will be so much better. And what will that lead to? The defense improving. I like some of what they're bringing back and what they added in the front 7. The secondary, there are significant questions, but that's Hafley's strong suit. So with this Boston College team, over 5.5, I just need them to get to bowl eligibility, and I'm willing to take that bet. They have 8 very winnable games. You're Northern Illinois, they're going to be like about a 10-point favorite. Holy Cross, UVA, we talked about. At Army, transitioning from the triple option could be a disaster. At Georgia Tech, after a bye. UConn at home, at Syracuse, Virginia Tech at home. Like 8 winnable games. I think Hafley gets this team to a bowl, better turnover luck, better defense, better offense. And it all starts with that offensive line. Trickle down effect here. better injury luck as well. They go from 4 to 140 offensive line starts returning year over year. So give me Boston College over 5.5 wins. Colin, any thoughts there? And then what's your favorite over?
No, Boston College is a team that I think has a chance to surprise. Hafley has got to start producing there. Especially the defensive metrics have been so off for him. So we'll see what he can do. But I will definitely back you on that. I'm going to pivot over to Louisville. Probably can't talk about it enough this year, how much I like the over on this team. I think it's ran up from 7 up to 8. I still think it's got more room to steam. This is a team that's getting a brand new coach, and Jeff Brom improved himself at Purdue, even making it to the Big Ten championship. They went 14th in the transfer portal rankings. He has brought in the players that he wants and getting them in place, including his quarterback who has played for him before, in Jack Plummer. There's a lot going on here on both sides of the ball. 94% per tarp coming back on offense. Ron English and Mark Hagan are going to call plays over there on that side. I expect them to be aggressive. They're going to improve from their tackle and coverage grading, which fell off under the Scott Satterfield era. But really, like I said, the star of this Louisville team is the schedule. Probably the easiest Power 5 schedule in all of college football. You take that in with a bunch of good players, like, the best center in the ACC and Brian Hudson. They got Jawar Jordan at running back, who's going to create a lot of missed tackles here. There's just too much not going positive for them when you consider the schedule, portal rankings, and players that know Brom's system. Brom is a proven coach, and we bet on him often, we have for years. So give me Louisville over 8.
And finally, we'll finish things up with third down favorite under. We might agree here, but the only under I like in the ACC, Wake Forest under 6.5 wins. Hartman leaving, tough schedule, questions in the trenches, might be some growing pains early, which is where the most winnable games come. Clausen, look, will probably find a way to get this team to 6 wins, but I think that's probably it. I like Wake Forest under 6.5. Way too many questions across the board. Do you agree?
I'm going to add to that. I'm going to add to that. No Sam Hartman. That's a 7-point adjustment negative for them from a PR perspective. The defense is less than 50% returning from a PBU and pressures perspective. The more negative points to their PR. We talked earlier in the podcast about a brand new center, a brand new guard, brand new quarterback who's 190 pounds and going to try to run the mesh RPO. It's just not going to work. And the strength of the offense is the wide receiver returning Donovan Green, who averaged 1.9 yards per route run. But who throws it to them? And are they going to be able to sustain not getting pressure? And are we changing our offensive scheme? We love Brad Lambert and the defensive coordinator here, but there are too many questions and a lot of holes on offense for this team to get to 7 wins, even though I projected it 6. Definitely under 6.5 here is the play.
Yeah, get 4 of the top 5 in the ACC. Then you're also at Notre Dame, who comes off of a bye. All right, that'll do it for us. It was nice to kick off the rust. We forgot BC, but luckily got them in. Now it's everything is firing from here on out. We have a lot more betting previews to come. 10 more episodes, 2 for the SEC. We'll cover every conference. And then it'll be week 0. We'll have a recap episode as well, going through our favorite bets. But thanks for tuning in. It's great to be back. You guys all make the podcast. Make sure you leave a review, a 5-star review. We're just getting back in action, so those really help us out. I'll do a bunch of giveaways as well. And if you've already left one, borrow your friend's phone, borrow your girlfriend's phone, leave a 5-star review, do some giveaways there. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe. Time for us to go keep up with more betting preview information to get ready for more episodes. College football will be here before we know it. It's good to be back. Good to be back with you, Colin, and we will catch y'all later. Cheers.
Peace out.